Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Democrats, the champions of democracy. That's how they market themselves, right? But of course we know marketing is one thing, reality is another. They claim to be the champions of democracy by fighting against voter ID laws and fighting for policies that make elections less safe. They virtue signal a whole lot about dark money, corporate money, big lobbyist groups buying out politicians. Yet they're all supported by dark money and big lobbyist groups, at least a whole lot more than Donald Trump is, who they accuse of being a corrupt, bought-out politician, working for corporate lobbyists and the rich capitalists. But of course, we know the reality is that Donald Trump, his campaign and his PAC, is a grassroots organization collecting money from everyday regular Americans. Small donations. They claim that everybody else is corrupt, but no, of course, not them. Meanwhile, they're attending Wall Street events and massive fundraising galas costing $10,000 to $15,000 a plate. They're getting massive donations from Wall Street and tech oligarchs. Of course, we've covered the hypocrisy, things like Zuckerbucks and a myriad of other scandals. And then there's this one. Gerrymandering only exists in states where Republicans control the state legislature. Democrats would never corrupt the, of course, neutral, very fair redistricting process. No, of course not. Except obviously that's not the truth. Democrats are presenting the most corrupt redistricting maps you can imagine, while continuously virtue signaling about corrupt Republican gerrymandering and redistricting, and accusing Republicans of drawing their maps to suppress the black vote. Of course, like we never heard that one before. But it turns out that Democrats are just as guilty, if not more guilty. And the funny thing is, Democrats have been drawing such partisan, such corrupt redistricting maps that judges are throwing them out left, right, and center. Another huge win for election integrity, folks. Of course, let me show you guys what's happening. But before we get into any of it, please make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, share the video as much as possible. We are still shadow banned by the YouTube algorithm, hidden from non-subscribed viewers. And with that out of the way, let's roll the tape. Alright friends, so the first story of the day. Judge throws out Maryland's abusive Democrat gerrymandered congressional map. Maryland judge tossed out the state's abusive Democrat gerrymandered congressional map on Friday. The limitation of the undue extension of power by any branch of government must be exercised to ensure that the will of the people is heard, no matter under which political placard those governing reside. Judge Lynn Battaglia, a senior judge serving on the Anne Arundel County Circuit Court, wrote in her opinion, according to Politico, the 2021 congressional plan is unconstitutional and subverts the will of those governed. The new districts, which were drawn by the Democratic-dominated legislature and passed over the veto of a Republican Governor Larry Hogan, could result in an 8-0 sweep for Democrats in the state in blue-leaning years. 7 districts in the state are solidly Democratic, while the lone Republican-held District Maryland, the Eastern Shore seat currently occupied by GOP Representative Andy Harris, was converted from a Republican vote sink into a hyper-competitive district. President Joe Biden carried the new version by less than a percentage point in 2020. And so this has been the Democrat strategy. Just like in 2018 and 2019, Democrats weren't focused on political messaging. Democrats were focused on passing new laws that they felt would benefit them. We'll just leave it as vague as possible. They're doing the same thing now. They're not focused on getting elected based on their performance or the president's performance. They're focused on gerrymandering massive blue states to such a despicable degree to where in Maryland, for instance, in a good Democratic year, they could win 8-0 and not send a single Republican to Congress. We saw the same thing in California, where the new Democrat-drawn map, which was approved, got rid of, from what I remember, 2 or 3 Republican seats clean, made those districts essentially unwinnable for a Republican when they used to be Republican-leaning. And we saw the same thing in the state of Illinois, of course, which we've covered. Adam Kinzinger has essentially been kissing Nancy Pelosi's shoe. He's completely given himself to the Democrat narrative and the Democrat cause to take down Donald Trump. And what did corrupt Illinois Democrats do to repay him? Well, they essentially deleted his congressional district from the map, redrawing it to where a Republican doesn't even stand a chance, and Adam Kinzinger, who was most likely going to get voted out anyways, or at least replaced by another Republican candidate, he had to announce that he was not going to run for re-election, not because he's a deeply unpopular turncoat Republican, a despicable rhino, but due to the fact that anti-democratic Democrats essentially destroyed the hope of any Republican or Adam Kinzinger from winning that district. And we have been seeing this all over the place. And if you think it's only happening in Democrat strongholds, well, of course not. They're also focused on the states that matter, the most important states, the states that they're most likely to lose, headed into 2022 and headed into 2024. Supreme Court rejects legislative maps drawn by Democrat Governor Tony Evers, accepts congressional boundaries. The U.S. Supreme Court blocked an illicit explicit legislative map for Wisconsin that was adopted by the state Supreme Court and backed by Democrats. The map was drawn up by Democratic Governor Tony Evers. Justice Sotomayor and Kagan joined in dissent to the decision. The U.S. Supreme Court on Wednesday rejected legislative maps drawn by Tony Evers and sent the matter back to the state's High Court, which had initially adopted the Democratic governor's proposed boundaries for the state's next 10-year maps. The rejection of Evers' assembly and Senate districts by the nation's highest court puts the issues of drawing maps back in the hands of Wisconsin Supreme Court and will further delay the state's redistricting process, which state election officials say needs to be resolved in order to prepare for upcoming elections. And of course, any surprise to anyone that Democrats are trying to pull this funny stuff in the state of Wisconsin? Of course not. Everybody knows that the Rust Belt and the Sun Belt, headed into 2022 and most likely into 2024, is going to be the Democrat weak spot, as oil and gas is under attack, as gas prices are soaring through the roof, as working class families are being crushed by the pressure of inflation, and as independent voters continue to ditch the Democrat Party and ditch Joe Biden. Well, then that's obviously where Democrats are going to be focused with all this legislative and redistricting trickery. I mean, for instance, just take a look at how grim it's looking for them. The most recent poll in Michigan is showing that 59% of Michigan voters would consider a new governor. This is the corruption of the Democrat Party, and more specifically, this is the projection of the Democrat Party. I mean, Joe Biden's DOJ literally just sued the state of Texas for the redistricting map. Texas is not allowed to draw their own map because somehow it's racist. But of course, how hypocritical is it that Joe Biden's DOJ is going after the state of Texas for drawing a map that allegedly favors Republicans and allegedly discriminates based on race, which of course Joe Biden's going to be unable to prove. I highly doubt the Supreme Court's going to side with them, but how hypocritical is it for them to launch a lawsuit like that while Democrat redistricting maps are getting thrown out by judges in the Supreme Court simultaneously? They are hypocrites. They're liars. They talk about democracy, the sanctity of democracy. It must be preserved and protected. Protected from who? Of course, from Democrats. I mean, we have been following these redistricting maps, and in a lot of these swing states, where there may be a Republican governor or a Republican state legislature, the maps in certain cases have changed maybe a little bit. Sometimes it's very marginally favored Republicans, but for the most part it's remained quite unchanged from its previous iteration. However, the most egregious examples of total gerrymandering, corrupt partisan gerrymandering, destroying Republican chances in many districts, comes from Democrat states. I mean, that's been the story basically for a year at this point, that Democrats are winning the redistricting war. The only place where Republicans are winning the redistricting battle is following the 2020 census, where New York and California lost a seat each, and Texas and other Republican states have been gaining seats. And that's just a population shift based on the 2020 census. That's not corrupt redistricting. It's the same projection and the same hypocrisy that we always see. Democrats claim that the Republican Party is the party of the rich, while simultaneously being the party of the billionaire class. Democrats claim that the Republican Party is the party of gerrymandering and corrupt redistricting. Well, obviously, the new maps speak for themselves. It is nothing but projection. But really, from my perspective, in my opinion, nothing has changed, and the Democrats are going to need a whole lot more than a couple seats based on corrupt gerrymandering to stop the absolute shellacking that is waiting for them in 2022. If anything, what they're doing right now just reeks of desperation, and will probably be more of a factor in future elections of the decade than it will be in the short term. That's what I got for you guys, though. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share it as much as possible. We are still shadow banned by the YouTube algorithm, hidden from non-subscribed viewers. I'm going to get back to work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.